Good morning, everyone. I decided to do an FB Live again on this very important topic. Some of you may have noticed that, once I do this, there will be a lot of bashing that's going to happen. And just to address the obvious physicalities of my condition right now, I'm not feeling too well. I've been having a difficult time sleeping the past few days, so yeah, I have eye bags. So anyway, let's head straight into it. Good morning to everyone. Today, the topic that I plan to discuss is the evils of the Cory regime. I labeled this part 1 because there are too many to mention in just one Facebook Live session. I'll just focus on the ones that started it all, which is the elections and events, subsequent events after the elections. And then we will take it from there. Okay, I made a list. For those of you, I'm using my iPhone 13 and I'm using my other iPhone to read through a list that I made early this morning when I woke up at 4 a.m. Let's head straight into the topic. All right, the evils of the Cory administration or the Cory regime. Let's start with the first and most glaring one. You, of course, already know because I know that my followers and the people on my page are quite smart. You know that the elections that led into the events of the EDSA rebellion fall under the 1973 Constitution. All right? Again, the Constitution that was operational during the time of the 1986 elections was the 1973 Constitution. Let's start with the first offensive action illegal action of Cory Aquino, which is she ran for president under the 1973 Constitution. That alone is already illegal. Why? Under the 1973 Constitution, a person must have lived in the Philippines for 10 years to be eligible to run for president. Let me repeat that. If I'm not mistaken, this is Article 4 of the 1973 Constitution. So, it was illegal for Cory to run as president in 1986. Why? Because under the 1973 Constitution, she cannot have run for president. A president must have resided in the Philippines for 10 years. A person must have lived in the Philippines for 10 years under the 1973 Constitution for them to be eligible to run for president. Cory was living in America before she ran for president. She is ineligible to run for president of the Philippines for that position. First, evil of the Cory regime. Second, all throughout the campaign season, she and her Catholic Church and academic officers of schools and universities, as well as media, Bombo Radyo and the like, Radyo Veritas and the like, pumped the public, made us all angry at Ferdinand Marcos. How? How did she do that? By playing the gender card. By playing necropolitics. Two appalling, disgusting political. They are allowed, but they're disgusting. They're shamefully, it's practically vulgar to use a dead person, to drag a dead body into politics for political gain. She used the death of her husband as a boost, nothing more, as a stepping stone to her narcissistic plan of megalomania. To be necropolitics, to become a dictator. first. And next, the gender card. This whole, babae lang ako, babae lang daw ako, kaya hindi ako pwede maging presidente. This is a disgusting ploy used by the political party of Cory Aquino to make her seem like the underdog. Two ploys, two strategies: victim card, necropolitics, and gender card. Disgusting behavior. And that was just during the campaigns. And it gets worse. Third evil of the Cory Aquino regime. Not only was she ineligible to run for president, but she did. But after she lost the democratic practice of suffrage during that time, she lost fair and square. Did she accept it? No, she did not. What did she do? She used a coup d'etat. She seized power illegally. Illegally ran for the position of president and then illegally took over the government using what? Less than 100,000 Filipinos to overturn the millions of votes that chose Ferdinand Marcos and stole the presidency from a democratically elected president, Ferdinand Marcos, with the help of some stalwarts of the Philippine Army, including, of course, Fidel V. Ramos, who featured prominently, much like Trillanes. They seized the government. They stole the elections from Ferdinand Marcos, who was chosen by the Filipino public. Disgusting, no? Next, after stealing the elections, this ineligible participant of the presidential elections, then, with the full intention of being a dictator, imposed a revolutionary government in the Philippines. Yes, my friends, in 1986, we had a revolutionary government. That was the second time a revolutionary government was activated in the Philippines. The first time was under Emilio Aguinaldo. And of course, we also know what sort of president Emilio Aguinaldo is. No? And then here comes Corazon Aquino, who used the revolutionary government scenario to do several more evil, more dastardly things during her regime. For one whole year, she implemented what she calls the Freedom Constitution, a one-year transitory constitution, because she effectively rescinded the 1973 Constitution, replaced it with the Freedom Constitution, which was in practice from 1986 till 1987 under her revolutionary government. What is the problem with those two things? By seizing power illegally and by imposing a revolutionary government, what did she do? And you can read this. This is not all hearsay. I'm not just analyzing this and making this up. You can go through the Freedom Constitution and read that during that time, during the revolutionary government, during the time of the Freedom Constitution, Cory seized the power, absorbed the power of Congress and Senate. So there were no longer three co-equal branches of government. There is only one true dictator that I have lived through in my lifetime. This was not Digong. This was not Gloria. This was not Erap. This was not Ramos. It was only Cory Aquino. There has only ever been one dictator that I have lived through in my life, and that is Cory Aquino. Her revolutionary government and her freedom constitution has robbed the Senate and the legislature of their power. She has absorbed it all into herself. That is what a true dictator does. Why do you think she did that? an ineligible candidate for president, backed by I don't know which powers that be, powers that were enough to topple down a democratic country's practice of suffrage. To what end? During this transitory constitution leading up to the heavily flawed and problematic 1987 constitution, within the span of 1 year, Cory implemented or gave the Executive Orders 1 and Executive Orders 2. Palalim na po tayo. So what's wrong with that? She is of course already the illegally enthroned dictator of the Philippines during that time, 1986. February 1986, she released Executive Order 1 and Executive Order 2. Executive Order 1 is to create the PCGG. You already know where this is leading to, no? Executive Order 1, her first order of business as president, she claims that there are so many grievances, there are so many ills happening in the country. But her first order of business is to take revenge on the Marcoses. Under the descriptions of the role of the PCGG in her first executive order under her tyrannical regime was what? Create the PCGG in order to sequester, seize, and freeze all of the Marcos assets. Her main point and her main goal for becoming president is to be anti-Marcos. Sounds like who? Sounds very familiar, no? Her whole purpose for her dictatorship, her 6-year dictatorship, and 2 constitutions, the underpinning logic of all of this is revenge. Revenge for what? Imelda's prettier? Marcos is smarter? They're more glamorous, they're better, they're more intellectual, they're more cultural, they're more classy, they have matangos noses. Is that reason enough to subject an entire country under dictatorship? An Aquino dictatorship? Okay, that was Executive Order 1. Create the PCGG for what purpose? To hound the Marcoses. This incompetent, inutil, infertile branch of government that we are paying for through tooth and nail with our taxes, which has been unable to prove that the Marcoses stole anything from the Philippines. Stole, ah? We are talking about the legal term stealing, theft. Sequestration does not prove theft. Only an idiot would think that sequestration in a civil forfeiture case is tantamount to theft. Again, only an idiot would think that civil forfeiture and sequestration is tantamount to theft. This is upsetting. Next, Executive Order 2 is what? Executive Order 2 is not anything directly benefiting the Filipino people, but as a side effect, it should benefit the Filipinos and the countries. But its primary order of business is again to hound the Marcoses. Her first 2 executive orders as president was what? Are all about the Marcoses. Nothing more, nothing less. It is all about the Marcoses. It's not about looking for better infrastructure. It's not for developing economic prosperity through trade deals. It is not about strengthening our sovereignty. It is not even about finding alleged murders or deaths, or it's not anything justice related. It's all about hounding, attacking, sequestering anything that is Marcos related. Her whole life revolves around the Marcoses. Nothing more, nothing less. Can you imagine how pathetic a life that must be? when you have no other purpose than just be against someone, against a name. But what's in a name, right? Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare. A rose by any other name would smell sweet. Wherefore art thou, Marcos? So, Executive Order and Executive Orders 1 and 2 is all about demonizing, hounding the Marcoses. What's the problem with that? The problem, time was able to show us how wrong and flawed all of these actions were. Because 35 years later, if not for Executive Orders 1 and 2, the Marcoses could have had their day in court. The Marcoses could have had a chance to prove that they were innocent. In effect, by creating Executive Orders 1 and 2, Cory has twisted the legal principle that you are innocent until proven guilty. What she has effectively done is that the Marcoses are now guilty unless they are able to prove themselves innocent. She has twisted the law to fit her own marbled and warped perception of logic, of reasoning, of values. This manner of innate corruption and evil, vindictiveness and vendetta can have no good end, will never prosper. This kind of hatred, that kind of vile and vindictive nature will lead to the creation of cancer and cancer. Divine justice. An anger, a hate, unfounded, will destroy the very cells, the very DNA of your person. Executive Orders 1 and 2 effectively made the Marcoses guilty unless they can prove themselves innocent. And that is what all of these anti-Marcos lawyers are harping on about. That we won. We won what? By making the law such that the Marcoses are guilty unless they prove themselves innocent. How can you prove yourselves innocent? It's like, oh, you prove you're Filipino. Small things. Difficult things. I breathe, I live, my blood is, but how? How evil must a person be to twist the law that way? You were already illegally put into power, an ineligible candidate for the presidency, seized power through military means, instilled a revolutionary government to become the first legal dictator of the Philippines, created a freedom constitution that made you the sole holder of the powers of Congress, Senate, and the presidency. You know, normally, an executive order can easily be rescinded by another executive order. So why has Cory's executive orders 1 and 2 not been rescinded by any president, not by Duterte, not by anyone, when it can normally be easily rescinded by just another executive order by a sitting president? The problem is that when Cory Aquino created Executive Orders 1 and 2 as the first military enthroned illegal actually, tyrant of the Philippines, she was also holding the power of legislature at that time. Therefore, Executive Orders 1 and 2 cannot be easily overturned like any other normal executive order, because those executive orders do not only hold the power of the executive branch of government, but they also carry with them the weight of legislature, which she had absorbed unto herself as a tyrant, as the sitting tyrant during her revolutionary government. That is our conundrum. The problem is that Cory, the tyrant, was holding the power of both executive and legislative branches of government when she demonized the Marcoses with her executive orders 1 and 2. How evil must you be? Now, those are all very nuanced, very nuanced legal issues. But let's go to a little more evident, self-evident examples of her evil. During her time, sequestered properties automatically become property of the government. Yes. Which means what? Whatever properties they had legally seized from the Marcoses and proven, or actually it was up to the Marcoses to prove that it belonged to them, that the Marcoses were unable to prove as theirs, became part of the government property, effectively became part of the whole nation's property, yours and mine. But since the whole government, the whole regime, the entire purpose of the Cory government was to seek vengeance on the Marcoses, what did they do to those properties? Let's look at Bataan nuclear plant. Binulok. But that belongs to you and me. It is a Marcos project, but it belongs to you and me, to the Filipino people, to the Republic of the Philippines. Nung sinira nila at binulok nila ang Bataan nuclear plant, sino ang ninakawan nila ng property? Sino ang binulokan nila ng property? Us. It was our property and they let it go to waste. Next. Let's go to something a little more superficial but potently obvious towards that idea that it was all about vendetta. Remember the Marcos Highway, Baguio. I was recently in Baguio. My dad and I were driving down the Marcos Highway from Baguio going to La Union, and we were trying to locate where was it? Where was that? Where was the bust of Ferdinand Marcos before? There's nothing left, not even rubble left. But that's a monument. That is a national monument. Belongs to the Filipino people. Belongs to all of us. Can you imagine what evil, what hatred you must have to destroy a national monument? Why? Why destroy a national monument? Money went into that. And to destroy a monument to Marcos is to deny that there are Filipinos who voted for Marcos in the 1986 plebiscite. Do we not have rights? Are we no longer part of the Philippines? That is what a dictator does. That is what a dictator does. Can you imagine? They destroyed a monument. And what? Replaced and renamed everything. Ninoy Aquino. Ninoy Aquino Airport. 500 peso with Ninoy Aquino on it. Buti sana kung gwapo at maganda. Buti sana kung gwapo at maganda. But how embarrassing. How embarrassing. The money is not just a representation of our value as a country, economically. But it is also a piece of art. It is also a piece of art. And we deserve better. Hold on. I'm ordering food. So there. Let me go through my list. Next. Among the many things that the Cory Aquino dictatorship sequestered are properties in Baguio. I was in Baguio recently, which is why I'm relaying these. I looked at the houses that belonged to the Marcoses, which were initially sequestered. Lo and behold, they're all rotting away. But once the government sequesters it, it becomes our property. Why do they not maintain it and sell it at premium cost, premium value? Why? Why sequester it and then just let it rot? It belongs to us. There's only one logical answer to that, and that is because of hate, of revenge, of vindictiveness, of vendetta. And do not tell me that the reason is because of the death of Ninoy. Because if the death of Ninoy was what spurred all of this desire to be president, then why did she stop trying to investigate who killed him? Why has it stopped? There was 6 years under Cory and there's 6 years under Pinoy. Noy. Why not spend some time unearthing that? Unless it is something that they do not want people to know or find out about. Sounds like someone else, no? That is how evil the regime is. That is how disgusting and vile and vindictive these people are. Let me tell you a story. I'm not going to name names, but people who know will know what I'm talking about. One of the Marcos cronies, all of the Marcos cronies, their properties were all sequestered. And much like the Marcoses, they filed cases against these people. And much like the Marcoses, they could not find evidence that these were stolen. So they had to return some of the properties. Some they are sitting on until the people die, like Ferdinand Marcos, which is, I think, her goal, Cory's goal, in not allowing him to come back or defend himself, is so that he will die before being absolved of all of these allegations against him. Anyway, I digress. This one Marcos crony owned a mine. He owned a mine. So normally, if you know how mines operate, an entire community thrives because of that industry, because of that mining industry within their community. Everyone's lives are interlaced or intertwined around that source of livelihood. When it was sequestered by the Cory government, they tried to prove that it was illegally acquired, and when they could not, and this was a mine, a very progressive mine. Of course, everything that was happening technology-wise, industry-wise in the Marcos era was progressive. It was high-tech. We were poised to be better than Japan. So, in that particular mine, millions of dollars went into the technology, into the machinery that was working that mine. And since the Cory government could not find a way to seize that property, you know what they did? They flooded it. They flooded the mine, thereby destroying all the machinery that was invested in that, destroying millions of dollars worth of machinery within an existing mine, destroying the livelihood of a community. And of course, that mine was no longer fit to be mined after that because it was already flooded, destroying an entire community's livelihood, effectively destroying that entire community as well. Can you imagine what evil would possess a person to do that when you already know that you will have to return that property to its true owner, to destroy it, to flood it? That is the sort of evil that we are dealing with. And it's just disgusting. So, I will end today's Facebook Live on that note. Just let you revisit all of those ideas of how evil, how corrupt, how morally bankrupt the entire Aquino regime was. 35 years later, not a single case of theft walang kahit anong kaso ng pagnanakaw na naisampa successfully ng PCGG or even American courts. Graft does not mean theft. Corruption does not necessarily mean theft. Non-filing of ITR does not mean theft. What else? Civil forfeiture does not mean theft. Sequestration does not mean theft. Theft is theft. You don't blur these lines. Ulitin ko po, graft is not theft. Non-filing of ITR is not theft. Civil forfeiture is not theft. Sequestration is not theft. So, we'll see each other again when I do the evils of the Cory regime, part 2. On that note, bye guys. See you again soon.